Hello, good morning and welcome to the Football Digest Weekly Podcast. Wow, what a truly astonishing week it's been for football. The last few days have been absolutely crazy. One like no other, following the remarkable issue of the proposed Super League by 12 of Europe's biggest clubs, including the Big Six in England. Then it's collapsed within 72 hours, following what can only be described as a tsunami of criticism and public outrage that went right to the top at government level, with Boris Johnson getting involved. The event was so seismic that the sacking of Jose Mourinho was relegated to an afterthought, which under normal circumstances would have been a huge story in itself. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Tottenham. What next for them? Who replaces Jose? Was it the right decision? There was a bit of football last night, thankfully. Two big games last night. Good wins for City and Tottenham in Ryan Mason's first game as caretaker boss. We'll talk about that. So joining me this week, I'm glad to say Andy Dunn, chief sports writer of the Daily Mirror, Matt Dunn, football aficionado at the Daily Express, and Neil Moxley, a good friend of ours. He's on the show this morning. He's chief sports writer of the Sunday People. Welcome along, guys. Andy, can I start with you? Obviously, there's only one place to start. The events of the last 3 or 4 days have been absolutely incredible, really. I know we've all been in this game a long time, but this was one hell of a story to cover. The news broke on Sunday. I know this embryo of an idea has grown and grown over the years. It's no secret that these big clubs have wanted to try and form some sort of breakaway league. When you heard the news on Sunday, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I think the initial thoughts when you hear this type of news, those of us who've been in the game a long time, is that we've heard it all before. As way back as the late 90s. Sorry, you were doing stories about potential super leagues. One came along every couple of years, basically, and has been over the last 12, 24 months. Talk of a super league. So you always think you start from the position where, well, they're using it as some sort of bargaining tool to get some sort of leverage in their arguments for a bigger slice of the European cake, the TV cake, and that's essentially, you've become jaundiced over the years, cynical about these things. It is literally just some sort of ruse, some sort of method where they can get their point across. And obviously, timing-wise, the story coming out, you thought, well, it's just on the eve of when UEFA are going to announce the expansion of the Champions League. And it's all part, you thought, of the political manoeuvrings within football that we're all very, very well accustomed to. But it soon became clear over the next few hours then on Sunday, on the timeline, that it was more than that. It was more than that. They were actually... And then, of course, there was the official announcement, which we expected late on Sunday evening, that actually this was a genuine... albeit extremely ill-fated attempt to create a new league. And that is when it became, a completely different story. We've never had this before where they've actually said, we are going to create this league. Here are the teams involved and we are committed to it. Obviously, they were that committed in the end. So that was when it became, a story that would change, the way we're thinking about football, for quite a long time, because the ramifications are clear. What is now, looking back on it clearly, you start from a point where, there's no one who ever thought it was a good idea, apart from those 10 clubs, 12 clubs involved. And now you look back and you think, actually, what is breathtaking is they thought that it would ever get any traction whatsoever, that it would ever get any chance of getting any positivity whatsoever. How could they actually do it? And what I think evolved over the next 36 hours after that was fascinating, really, in the way that, listen, they can't not have expected the sort of negative publicity that came their way. Why then they didn't expect, though, for that negative publicity to actually morph into a uniform backlash, I'm not sure. But what happened then was as soon as people started speaking out against it, politicians, royalty even, and most pundits, all pundits. I think people then became emboldened to say it's a little bit more than that. It's about time we made a stance. And people became emboldened then in their criticism of it. And then clubs jumped in. I'm not being funny, but clubs who probably you wouldn't expect to be, or you wouldn't say have, much justification in being on the high moral ground. West Ham, I mean, took the high moral ground. Now, really, over what's happened at that club over the last few years, but then everyone just became, well, you know what? And people put the finger in the air and thought, you know what? The mood is we can absolutely hammer these clubs now. And then myself, you, and Matt, we're all in on the Alexander press conference. And that to me was a point where, you know what they expected. Clearly, if it was an even sort of bigger attempt at getting a bargaining tool with UEFA, it backfired spectacularly, because what they expected clearly, and in their sort of rather amateur statement on Sunday night, was that they wanted dialogue with UEFA, and what they probably expected was UEFA to say okay, and they were going to have dialogue. In the 12 hours before Zefferin's press conference, he has looked around. He's thought, you know what, everyone is against this. He even referenced Boris Johnson, didn't he? He said everyone is against this. He's thought, you know what, I'm not going into the way to play this is not to be conciliatory. I am now just going to go all guns blazing for these guys, because everyone will nod. And not only did he went double barrel, didn't he? He went absolutely double barrel. So where they expected, the 12 clubs expected Zefferin to say maybe, okay, we can come to we can negotiate, whatever. Instead, he says, no, you're snakes, you're liars, you're spitting in the face of football. I mean, it was just. And it was at that point I thought, you know what, this really is, it's dead in the water already. This is dead in the water already. I think how quickly you realised it was dead in the water is a testament to the fans' reaction to it, which you can't underestimate. It was a testament to every single authority's reaction to it. It was a testament to every club's reaction to it, every player's reaction to it. And then a story that was so seismic, yet you knew the idea of it was doomed, as I say, within... if you were generous, you'd say 36 hours. But certainly from when it was announced on Sunday, I think on Tuesday morning, after the events of Monday, on Tuesday morning when the club started, putting out their statements as well, you knew by Tuesday lunchtime that it wasn't a question of how they would, when they would. It wasn't a question of if they would try and slither out of this one. It was just a question of how and when they would. And maybe it was a bit of a surprise that came so quickly, but it was absolutely no surprise that it came at all.
Matt, we were both at Wembley on Sunday tea time covering the FA Cup semi-final. We were writing other things that had no relation to the game we were actually at. But when you were writing about the Super League on Sunday night for the Daily Express, did you ever imagine that it would? I felt I'm writing about something here that, like Dunny says, is never going to happen. But we genuinely surprised at how quickly it all fell through and collapsed like a pack of cards on Tuesday evening. So within 48 hours.
I'm surprised how quickly it happened, but funny enough, I'm glad I missed nothing much on Sunday afternoon, apparently, because not having seen much of the football because we're so busy writing, apparently there wasn't much football to miss. And thankfully, it was the same on Tuesday because I was at Stamford Bridge when the news, literally as I was walking up to the ground, there were protests going on, and news filtered out that Chelsea were thinking, we're looking at ways of withdrawing from the group. And that was the first sign of a splinter actually from within the camp. And the fans just suddenly, as one started cheering like it was a goal had been scored, as the news went around social media. And then they started singing, we've saved football. And it was just remarkable how quickly the sense of relief. But from that moment, it felt that once that one of the teams decided, no, this isn't for us. And it soon emerged that the others were feeling much the same way. It was clear it wasn't going to happen. And it took Chelsea, to be honest, didn't want to put a statement out for a long time because they were worried about the legal ramifications of extricating themselves from this. But when everyone else started putting statements out, it was a matter of it was just about 7:15 that the sort of news became public they were coming out. And then by midnight, I think all six had put statements out to say they were gone. And that was how, and Chelsea in the end did it playing catch up because they didn't want to miss the moral high ground. It just absolutely fell on its face once it was realised. Once their bluff was called, to be honest, and once the whole world stood up and said, no, we don't want this. And the person who's knows is most out of joint is Perez, because the Premier League will go back now to their decent enough system where they rake in the money from the domestic league that's very lucrative. And it's Perez who's been the driving force behind this, with Agnelli in Italy, who are left with leagues that can't sustain their overspending and desperate to try and pay the bills, while the Premier League can actually draw on strong resources anyway. This is the big surprise this time, is it's always when, as Andy referenced, when this comes up before, it's normally a watching brief by the Premier League clubs who never really get involved because they're making quite enough money as it is, thank you very much. But this time they had all jumped in both feet, and that was what made this different. But I mean, they'll go back to the status quo as much as they can. It'll be interesting to see how much infighting there is amongst the 12 clubs, though, because Perez has shown no signs of wanting to let this go completely. And it might be a bit more ticklish than some of the Premier League clubs are making out. We don't know the contents of those pieces of paper they signed on Saturday afternoon that could make life a little bit awkward for them going forwards. But yeah, the whole thing fell on its down in a matter of hours.
Neil, as an esteemed Sunday journalist, were you having a little chuckle to yourself over a beer on Tuesday night, thinking about all your daily colleagues scrambling around to make sense of this farcical situation?
I don't indulge in Schadenfreude like that, Jez. You know, not really. I thought it was a joke, quite frankly. When the first time I was doing something else, I have to be honest, on Sunday afternoon, and I thought I checked the date because I saw something. There was a statement from Arsenal's website that caught my eye, and I honestly thought it was a spoof. I thought I must have signed up to one of these spoof accounts, and on Twitter, and I looked down it and thought, "Blimey, is he serious?" And I couldn't quite work out, why now, what, and then obviously, as as Matt's alluded to, it's basically happened because Real Madrid and basically Real Madrid have found themselves looking at a £900 million worth of debt or euros worth of debt and trying to work out how they're going to repay it. And that's, to me, has been the driving force for it all along. Somebody's in trouble money-wise, and they've dragged 6 accomplices with them down with them effectively. And now it remains to be seen, really where we go from here, and what the ramifications are, because as Andy touched upon, it's inflamed everyone in football. Never has the consensus been so strong, I don't think, against anything in football. I can't think of anything that's invoked such a passionate defence of the game itself. And I think there's a line being crossed, quite frankly. And I think they're going to. I'd be very surprised if there weren't serious sanctions from UEFA towards those 6 clubs, as far as they can, because obviously they're constituent members, the majority of them are of the Champions League, which remains the blue ribbon competition, and also from the Premier League, the 14 clubs who basically were ridden roughshod over, and I expect them to pretty much make sure that the willful destruction of the competition that was perpetrated by these 6 is punished adequately. I expect that. The interesting thing going forward is going to be what range of sanctions that the clubs look at. Personally, I think they'll leave the competition, the Premier League, alone this season. And I would be very surprised if it was me in charge. I would be recommending 12-point deductions across the board for the 6 at the start of next season.
Are you not punishing fans if you do that? There's some debate now about whether punishing clubs as a whole is unfair, and that individual directors, executives, chief executives should be punished, because if you deduct a team 9 points, that's obviously you're taking points off supporters, aren't you? It's an awkward situation.
Well, quite frankly, Jez, as a supporter of Birmingham City, nobody was moaning too much when we had 9 points taken off us for profit and sustainability regulations. I didn't see anybody step into the defence of Wigan, Sheffield Wednesday, a whole host of other football clubs who've been punished basically for the misdemeanours of their owners. So the precedent's been set as far as I'm concerned. Yes, supporters are going to be punished, but therein lies the problem for football, really. To be honest, how do you keep a check on owners who have willfully basically just plunged their clubs into footballing chaos? I hear what you say, but I can't. Personally, I think there's an open door now for football. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, quite frankly, now that the public are basically on side for the government to step in, because football can't be trusted to run itself, and basically, I think there needs to be some regulation from above. So that's my point of view, and I would like to see a permanent £10 million a year tax placed on every single Premier League and have it funneled back into grassroots football, and that £200 million a year should see grassroots football catered for very nicely over the course of the next however long the cash cow that is the Premier League continues to develop. I mean, let's be honest. £10 million a year if you're Manchester United, is Luke Shaw's salary. It's I wouldn't say it's neither here nor there, but it's not huge. And I'm just putting that out there as a possible topic for discussion, really, to be honest, more than as a starting point for a discussion as to what we do going forward. Because I don't think it was an equitable solution to have closed competitions. So that they need to be discouraged from doing so again.
Andy, just before we continue to move on, try and take this story forward, how we sort of build bridges again. Just going back to the Kefren thing, because me and you were obviously texting each other during that remarkable Zoom call. Do you think there is an irony here that Kefren is sort of talking about liars and snakes, and he's the president of an organisation which has been exposed for numerous wrongdoings in the game, especially financial corruption and things like that. But do you think he's gone up in people's estimations, the neutral football fan, given what he said this week? Do you think, he's the second most powerful man in football, I suppose, but what do you think about that?
Well, he probably has. As I say, there is a grand irony, and it's not restricted to UEFA in how many people, how many organisations have been able to amass on a very crowded, high moral ground. And as much as I agree with Mox on a lot of points there, one of them, for example, the idea of politicians and government, to me, getting involved in football is absolutely. I just think dreadful. I just don't. These the charlatans who are that absolutely populate so many aspects of government. I don't want them involved in football. Do I want? Just look at the way they behave during the ratio between the pandemic and football, and the stuff that's come out with people like Julian Knight, Oliver Dowden. Do I want these guys running football? No, I really don't. Do I want Boris Johnson running football? No, I really don't. Yeah, he's seen as someone who's been somehow on the side of good in this. And that goes back to what you say about UEFA, is that UEFA, FIFA, the governments, they're all seen as the good guys and all this, which in the sense that they oppose it, I guess nominally you can say they are. But really are these people that you want to be held up as being great guardians of our game? No, I think government regulation is just the idea of an independent regulator may be, but certainly I don't want to see any politicians sticking their oar into football. Full stop. For Ceferin and for UEFA, clearly, in a way, you could almost, if it would have been a very fanciful, very clever spin doctor or strategist who would have put this scenario out. But somehow or other, I say UEFA have come across as being on the, and it was brilliant. It was like the next day when he says, oh, listen, lads, it's okay. You can come and say you're sorry. Can you imagine these 10 clubs thinking 48 hours later, we're going to have the president of UEFA patronising us to the tune of saying, lads, you're all human, you all make mistakes, but you come back in, you can do your penance and come back in. They're thinking, what happened here? This was supposed to be the biggest shot across UEFA's bows in footballing history. And they end up with the presidents calling them snakes one day and the next day saying, but listen, don't worry, lads, if you say sorry, we'll think about letting you back in. He then turns around and he welcomes Man City back as though there's some sort of prodigal son. This is UEFA and Man City we're talking about, for goodness sake. And he said, and he's going on about, oh yeah, we know you'll be a great asset. Come on, come back in, lads. I'll take a seat, have a cup of tea. And meanwhile, the president of PSG is going to be made ECA president or whatever. It's, this whole situation is full of ironies that you could not begin to even go into them. And the point is, when I say about the strategy, is that is that we all wrote. I mean, that was an hour and 5 minutes of absolute, for us, dynamite. You were wondering what insult he was going to come up with next, and just when you thought he'd finished, he'd throw another one in. And it was just this is just astonishing. But what it did is it relegated the reorganisation of the Champions League, the expansion of the Champions League, the admission of 2 clubs who won't have gained automatic entry into the Champions League. It relegated all that to what we call in the trade a blob par, i.e. one par tacked on the end of everything else. And that's what it did. I mean, I got to the end of writing it up, and then I suddenly thought, I actually better write something about this new Champions League, which on any given day would be a big story. You're reorganising football's blue ribbon club event, and it becomes 6 lines of copy because of everything else. And in a way, had his strategist said, let's play this out like that, it would have been perfect. And only now, 48 hours later, people are beginning to say, okay, hang on a minute. Now let's have a look at the UEFA's Champions League expansion. Now let's see if this is good for football. Is it good for football to have these extra games? Is it good for football to have these teams allowed in who haven't qualified from the previous seasons, whatever? And, what is the slice of the cake for clubs, et cetera, et cetera? So has he gone up in our estimation? Well, I mean, listen, I wouldn't cross him, that's for sure. And again, you can only, for all what I'm trying to sort of suggest are the sort of subtle reasons behind it, the fact that he came out and absolutely destroyed them was I think, as much as we laud, certain pundits, that was as withering as any attack. And to me, I think the clubs would have looked at that and thought, that's it really.
I text Phil Townsend, who works for UEFA, obviously.
He was on the end of the table, wasn't he?
Yeah, I texted him afterwards and basically said, holy smoke, I wouldn't pick a fight with Alexander Kseferin.
Yes.
And he texted me back about 20 minutes later, said, I've just shown him your text, and he just laughed, chuckled like a Bond villain. With
I know. But he kept. It was brilliant because he kept taking his glasses off, didn't he? When he got to it, he kept taking his glasses off, and it always reminded me of someone in a pub who's getting more and more angry, and then takes his glasses off because he knows he's about to be in a fight. Yeah. I mean, honestly, if there was someone in front of me, he would have nutted him. And I just thought, my word, I'm not having that. And at that point, you're thinking, and listen, as I say, there is a whole thing about these organisations and people and politicians who've taken umbrage against this idea. Now you look at themselves and see exactly what they are doing for the good of the game.
Well, Andy, I take up on that because in amongst everything else was snuck through on Monday the announcement that the fan-led review of football was going to be brought forward by the politicians. Yeah. Led by Tracy Crouch, who I think is actually one of the stronger voices on sport we've had in recent years, and has principles, hence the manner of her resignation over some of the gambling legislation that she wants to bring through. But that's going to happen now. And I'm with you. I think there's a lot of people, politicians who like football because it gets them on the telly talking about things their constituents are interested in. But there's a little bit too much of that grandstanding. But that said, what this has shown is the Premier League can't be trusted to look after the football family. It's less than a year since we were talking about the football family all getting together and sorting out the game once and for all. When pandemic first struck, Barry went to the wall for the sake of £2 million. And, all that talk, no, this is the game changer. This is when football takes responsibility for itself. And yet a year down the line, our 6 biggest clubs, our 6 biggest money earners are there feathering their own nests, looking to jump into bed with Europe instead of looking at their own game. So as much as it pains me that the wrong politicians are going to get involved, I think if a few of the right ones get involved, government legislators, they provide the policing to all these games, so they have the power to wield a stick against football to make it do what it needs to do now, to shape up the game, at least domestically, look after the pyramid, do what it's supposed to do with a stronger FA, perhaps, hopefully with an independent review, an independent governing body, perhaps, leave the FA to do the discipline side and the England team, and then let's have the governance of the game in somebody else's hands, maybe. But there has got to be a proper change now, so that the 6 people we're relying on for all the money can't just suddenly at a whim do what they did on Saturday and sign up to jump into bed with somebody else and potentially take all the money that's in the game in this country and share it amongst their rich friends, effectively, maybe not cash rich at the moment, but their other big clubs in Europe, when they should be looking after the teams that are lower down the pyramid, because they're the ones on which their success is built on, and the culture of the game in this country, and it goes all the way down to the grassroots in this country. And I don't like to be too parochial about it and too Little England or whatever, but effectively it is the English game that they're champions on. It's a very unique flavour to our league, which is what makes it so successful, and that's built upon kids in our country playing football on our grass pitches. So and our AstroTurf pitches, whatever they can put infrastructure they can put in place, but that's what the whole thing is built on, and it's all collapsing underneath them, and they're just fiddling almost while the whole of football burns away to nothing in the midst of a pandemic. And that's what really stuck in the craw. Stood at Wembley, thinking about what you're right is. Hang on a sec, you're in an empty Wembley Stadium virtually. You're seeing the first few fans come back, the green shoots of football getting back to normality. And that's all the sign that these clubs needed to say, right, okay, lads, we're off to make advantage of whatever money making scheme we can now. And I think it's going to take government now to call that to a halt. Unless I just pray with you, Andy, that it's the right politicians and not the ones that you talked about earlier, can at least bang some heads together and get us to move in the right direction finally.
Mox, yesterday was basically a day full of pitiful, grovelling apologies from these billionaire owners like the Glazers, J.W. Henry. I mean, they just queued up one after one to apologise to fans and the game. But I don't know if you saw the J.W. Henry video that he posted.
I did, yeah.
It's to me, I don't know if you agree, but it sort of lacked a lot of empathy. He referred to Liverpool as LFC, and it just made me think, these guys, they still don't get it, really, do they? They don't. Henry was apologising just to the Liverpool fans, not to the wider spectrum of all football lovers around the world. Do you agree with that? Do you think it just highlighted even more the sort of distance there is between these mega rich people and the man on the street who saves up all week to go watch a football match?
Yeah, I do. I think it comes down to one simple phrase, mate. I think it comes down to a bond of trust. And I think it's been just broken beyond repair, quite frankly. I think they were just it was just words for the sake of it. I don't, to be honest with you, I was looking, at yesterday morning at the apologies that were listed by the different clubs. Manchester United will be working with others across the football community to come up with sustainable solutions for the long-term challenges facing the game. Chelsea, we've decided continued participation will not be in our best interests. Manchester City, we have formally enacted procedures to withdraw. Arsenal, the system needs to be fixed. I mean, it wasn't until J.W. Henry came out with his apology, however, there really was one, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I've got to be quite honest with you. It's set against the backdrop of this bond of trust being just shattered into a million pieces, and that for me, how are they going to trust? Anything that the owners say again? I mean, it was only 12 months ago at the start of this pandemic that Liverpool decided to furlough its staff, and it was only the backlash of supporters that managed to prevent this great football club from furloughing its staff, having made a £50 million profit in the last 12 months. Now,
Tottenham were guilty of that as well.
But this is just again another smack in the face for Liverpool fans and football fans in general, because I'm not holding up J.W. Henry as being any different from any of the others, quite frankly. They were all they all showed the solidarity signing up to it, so they can all take the medicine. Once the punishment's handed down, just quickly, just before we move on, just want to come back to Andy's point. He doesn't want to see politicians. Neither do I, quite frankly. My bond of trust with politicians was broken some time ago, and Julian Knight is my MP, or worse. So I've got no, absolutely, I agree with grandstanding and all the rest of it, but I just think that football has shown itself so utterly incapable of sorting itself out that, there's only one avenue left open to it, despite what I think of all these people. And that's legislation. That's legislation from above. And as long as it's done with somebody who's got a grasp of what the football industry actually is, then I really don't see any other outcome, quite frankly. But please don't for 1 minute I hold politicians on any great pedestal as it's just they're the only solution I can see to sorting out that football will take any notice of.
And Mox, if we just say about those statements you read out there, and all the words you use there, the one that really gets me and why they keep doing it, doesn't someone tell them stakeholders? Who are stakeholders? I'll tell you what, there's a few fans holding stakes, wanting to do something else with them, put some heads on them. I think that was what they want to do. Stakeholders, key stakeholders. Mate, there are players and there are fans. End of story. We'll consult all the stakeholders in all the stakeholders' best interest. Since when have you become? We've got the best stakeholders in the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just ridiculous. But this is the ownership, and this is now without generalizing and be about a certain type of owner, i.e., an American owner. I am going to, because the fact of the matter is that they see the clubs. Look at the American model, right? I mean, here's a story about the American football team, the Baltimore Colts. Yeah, so their owner, a guy called Robert Hersey, he decided he wanted to move to Baltimore Colts to become the Indianapolis Colts, and everyone was against him in Baltimore. They had a strong fan base, the media followed them, whatever. So he did a moonlight flit, loaded up 20 articulated lorries and took the club to Indianapolis, and that was it. And when he was, when they woke up, and I mean literally woke up and their club had gone, he's then sort of, the media are onto him in Indianapolis, and he said something along the lines of, well, listen, it's not your ball club, and it's not the people's ball club. It's my ball club. I own it. I do what I want. And if I want to pack it up and take it to Indianapolis, then I'll do it. And that's not the only instance of that in American sport. We all know, Club St. Louis Rams become the LA Rams. That is the way they work. They own the ball clubs. They can't get the concept, the noble concept that we all have, which is actually Liverpool Football Club belongs to the people of Liverpool. Manchester United Football Club belongs to Manchester United fans. We all trot this out, don't we? I mean, I know, and we hear it all again. If you had, a pound for the amount of times people said, but it's the fans that make the club, and we believe in that, and we will always believe in that. Liverpool is still a great club, despite what they've done, over this time. But these guys don't think like that. These guys just think it is something they own. The Glazers think they own it. They're not bothered about what the fans think about them. They're not bothered about this any noble idea of history, tradition, what it means to a community. They're not interested in the community, of course not. John W. Henry and Liverpool's owners, they tried to trademark the name of Liverpool, the city. Yeah. I mean, what else did you expect them to do about having, no qualms in trying to join a European Super League? That whole thing, and it's not excusing them, but that is the way they are. They own the ball club, as this guy, with the Baltimore Colts, and I do what I want with it. Now, what they've been shown is that actually, and let's face it, that also, when I say that, they've reacted to supporters, yes, but they also know that in terms of as a business, once everyone is against it, then as a business, it's not viable. So the European Super League instantly became not financially viable. So that is as much probably why they did it as upsetting the man on the street. But it's just a whole new it's a whole sort of mindset of them that they own the ball club, and that's as simple as that. And that is where the ownership of clubs has always been a moot point. It's always been a contentious point. It's why we bring in fit and proper persons tests, which have shown themselves to be basically not fit and proper for their purpose. And that's why it will continue to be, the ownership of football clubs will continue to be, and has been, by the way, long before these guys come along as well.
Matt, Andy sort of beat me to the punch there. It's going to be my next question. But a lot of these big clubs, are owned by, Arsenal are owned by Americans, Liverpool are owned by Americans, United are owned by Americans. Because these clubs are worth so much money, say if the Glazers wanted to sell Manchester United, which I'm clearly thinking that the part of this plot to join the Super League would have been to double the value of Man United to £4 billion and then sell it on and make a lot of money. If the Glazers said tomorrow, right, we're selling Man United, who's going to buy us? The problem is that these rich, you have to be mega rich to even contemplate buying a club like Manchester United. These are generally people from America, successful men. Are you just going from the frying pan into the fire? I mean, as long as these rich people own institutions like Manchester United and Liverpool, are we always going to face the same problem? The problem is what Dunny just basically said, that all they're bothered about is using these football clubs as a tool with which to make money. How are we ever going to escape that?
Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, there's very few people who could afford to buy a Premier League football club. The problem is, of those very few people, most of them want a nice, easy life because they've earned it with all their money. And the people who don't want a nice, easy life are those with a bit of vanity about themselves. And they're the ones that tend to buy the football clubs. So, you do it to create a profile for yourself, perhaps, which you haven't got. And there's a danger that attracts the wrong sort of person. It is difficult because, I suppose someone's got to own it, but it wasn't so long ago that all the big clubs were PLCs, and you could refloat or whatever. There's no reason why it has to be owned by an individual. Why not sell off the football club as shares and go back that way in some sort of way? I'm not particularly. It happens so infrequently, these takeovers now at that level. If you notice, most people are those that take over clubs wanting to get to that level in the hope that they crack Premier League football and then instantly multiply the value of their company by 10. By getting promotion. It is difficult, but then again, how long's Newcastle been up for sale? There aren't many people who can buy a Newcastle. Not that. Even a rubbish fit and proper person's test. It is difficult, and these things are only worth the value that they're worth when you come to want to sell them. So it is going to be hard for some of these owners that have made fools of themselves. Let's not mince words on that. It's going to be hard for them to back out anytime soon. So it's going to be an awkward time at those clubs. And you can't just suddenly say, go on, so many million or near offer and put an advert in the back page of the Liverpool Echo, and expect to get shot of it by the end of the week. It's going to be an awkward time for those clubs, and they've got to reconcile between themselves how they move forward. And I can see how. Well, look what happened last time with Liverpool with the previous owners that fell out with the club. That just had to run until a sale was organised, and there was no way back. It's a mess for those clubs. But to be honest, I don't think many people outside of those clubs feel that sorry for them.
Mark, obviously we know now that so many bridges have been burned in this whole failed and doomed project. I mean, you've got 14 Premier League clubs that have basically turned their nose up at the Big Six. The Big Six have come back grovelling. They were omitted from a shareholders meeting earlier in the week when the 14 just basically ganged up on the Big Six. Obviously, in the middle of this is Richard Masters as chief executive of the Premier League. He runs the Premier League. Where does he even begin to start trying to mend this damage that's been done?
Well, he's got a difficult balancing act, hasn't he? Because clearly the Big Six are the Big Six for a reason. They're the ones that generate the most revenue, the most interest, have the most supporters. It was a whole bedrock for them actually escaping in the first place. The fact that they could do this, so they did. And it's long. They've always had this. Excuse me. Selling off individual television rights. That's long been booted. We're not going to bother with the collective. We're going to go and sell our own as a possible revenue generator. I mean, so he's got to reconcile the punishment that has to be meted out. There has to be some sanctions levelled against the six, with obviously the 14 that weren't invited to the party. So that's his big problem. And it's interesting to see that that Richard Scudamore, the former chief executive, was drafted in because, to be fair to Richard Masters, while I think his handling of the Newcastle United situation has been little short of, well, to be honest, probably from a Premier League position, it's been a very clever one. My own personal view is that it should have gone through, but that's another argument. But so he's had the pandemic, he's had problems over Newcastle. And then he's had this to contend with in a very short space of time. So I was quite pleased to see Richard Scudamore, sort of brought in to try and mediate, because Scudamore understands, the landscape, the people involved far better, and can possibly, bring about an equitable solution, to what is quite a thorny problem, because you've basically got cats in a bag fighting, haven't you? That's basically what it is. There's 14 people who representing clubs who feel very, very brushed off, very, very left out, very, very, and possibly, while they understand the motives of the 6 big clubs involved, would be mightily brushed off at the manner in which it's been handled, and would seek for some sort of redress. So that's Richard Masters' main priority in the next. He's reconciling those two vastly different problems.
Dunny, do you think we can ever see a harmonious game in the future?
I'm not sure, Jeremy, that we've ever had a harmonious game, have we? There's been disharmony in the game for, long before our time. I mean, it's as simple as that. Manchester City, when under different ownerships, under different chief execs or secretaries as they were then, remember Peter Swales, these things do. Let's not, for as bad as this is, let's not forget there have been good and bad owners in football since owners existed. Owners in football, a while ago, treated players as though they were, young men being sent down the mines. It's not a uniquely modern thing. It's relevant to us, of course it is. And no, we won't see a harmonious game. But that's just by the very nature that certain clubs will always look after their own interests. To ask someone to be completely and utterly sort of altruistic about this whole situation and say, well, we're going to do the best for the good of the game, just isn't going to happen, because every club will want to look after its own interests. There are, you only hope that actually, they do. So the bigger clubs do certainly for a short while, sort of, save a bit of penance and sort of try and think of the greater good. But Mox is absolutely spot on. These, they are called. I mean, hopefully, it'd be nice if we didn't call them this, from after this particular incident, the Big Six anymore. But they were called that for a reason, because they're the Big Six financial generators. And for as much as they, you might want to punish them, or you might want to, for them to sort of be a lot less sort of brash and whatever. The fact of the matter is, they can always turn around and say, well, okay, we can negotiate our own TV deal, next time around. These are the 14 clubs, and your West Hams and your Evertons and people like that who are against them. When it comes around to next TV deal, they don't. The bottom line is Liverpool, Manchester United, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Spurs. Will be the driving force of that deal to get to keep the collective going. In the end, they will turn around and say, well, listen, we're the ones who people are watching. So for these clubs, for example, the clubs this season, Sheffield United, Fulham, they're going to turn around, West Brom, they're going to turn around and say, well, listen, there's a reason why you're getting relegated, yet you're still earning 130 million quid. And it's a lot to do with us. So as long as you've got the discrepancy in the size of clubs, then you're not going to get perfect harmony. But I don't think we should get carried away with the idea that, this is absolutely sort of new thing, because it's not. It's just some clubs have always been bigger than others. It's a George Orwell thing. They all think they're equal, but some are more equal than others.
Yeah, good stuff.
George Orwell, wasn't it, Dunny?
Yes, sleep. Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah, all animals.
Wake up, Dunny.
Animal farm.
That's good stuff, boys. Let's move on to another huge story that happened this week. And obviously, Jose Mourinho was sacked by Daniel Levy at Tottenham. Mark, you're entrenched in the comings and goings at Tottenham. Were you surprised at the timing of it, given that it was in the build-up of the week of the League Cup final?
6 days before he got a chance to do exactly what he was brought in to do in the first place. Yeah, it does. That timing just beggars belief. Well, the only thing, I mean, I unfortunately haven't got access to the precise details of his contract, but it did make me wonder whether, in the same way he's got a 2 million bonus for keeping him in the top four, he might have a little something coming his way were he to land them a trophy, and Levy didn't want to pay him that. That did raise itself as a thought, because we've all known football clubs that have bent the rules and done weird things just to save themselves a few bob on bonus money and whatever else. It was just clear it wasn't. Well, it's been clear it's not working for a long time. So the timing, well, it wouldn't have surprised me if it was earlier, to be honest. But yeah, 6 days before the cup final did seem a bit odd when you've persevered that far. But Spurs recently have been appalling. They've scrapped a few results out in amongst it all, but the spirit had gone. And I was just watching. I was only watching the second half last night. But some of that spirit instantly seemed to come back. There was more pressing. There just seemed to be a bit more exuberance about their play. With a 29-year-old manager who wasn't good enough to be in that team is suddenly told, right, you can be manager of it. The whole dynamic's weird, but there was just some sort of sense of relief. Gareth Bale began to look interested again for the first time this season. There were very few people still loyal to Mourinho and his methods. I went through it again with it's that Amazon Prime video. It was such an eye-opener. The first thing he says to Davinson Sanchez was, I could see you've lost that Europa League final in 2017 in the tunnel because your heart wasn't in it and none of your teammates were. And that's the first time he's met the bloke. And you think, how's that going to make? And he's struggled. You look at the number of players. Harry Winks was a regular England international. He's gone, by the way. Eric Dyer, as self-confident as you can think. He seems to have lost his belief in where he can play. Before he was, a promising midfielder. Now he's a defender, and now he's not even that. Dele Alli, goodness knows what's gone on there, but certainly Mourinho's not got the best. It's been Dele's brother. It's his cousin, I think, or third cousin once removed at the moment. But Matt Doherty went from Wolves, and Mox, you'd have seen it play a lot more there. I don't know if you recognise the same player. I know he's had injury problems, but it's just where's the improvement? He's a coach, first of all. He makes a point. He's the head coach at Spurs because he doesn't do the transfers. What's he coaching? He's just making all the players worth. The two exceptions to that are Harry Kane, who'll keep becoming a better player until his knees and his ankles finally give in, and Heung-min Son, who again has that same inner self-belief that's going to make him a star wherever he goes. And aside from that, he's just there's a lack of intensity about training, we're told, and you thought that's something Mourinho would have been hard on, and it just the whole thing seems a mess, and it's no surprise that he's gone. What they're hoping to achieve, I don't know. Some sort of collective, let's do it for Ryan, who's a popular figure around Spurs. When he last played, 7 of the other players in the starting lineup game against Newcastle, just after they'd lost the league to Leicester, 7 of those other players were available to him if they'd been fit last night, and Dele Alli was suspended for his last game. So that's 8. It's the same team basically that he left with a couple of extra players. So there's that will to do well again. Let's all muck in together, sort of thing, and that might carry them to the top 4. It probably won't, but next Sunday is going to be interesting because you don't want to be playing your second game as a manager against Pep Guardiola, I would think. But that's a situation Levy suddenly dropped them in, and that's why, to come back to your question, the timing is bizarre because any other week sort of thing, either later or sack him after he's lost the cup final or a few weeks ago. But odd, really odd.
Mox, do you think it was the right decision? Do you think Mourinho is starting to look a bit of a tired manager who's been left behind by the game?
Yeah, I just want to pick up very quickly before we answer that point, and we'll come to that. I just want to pick up on Matt's what Matt sort of just finished on. Let's just assume that Jose won on Sunday. Daniel Levy, it's very difficult for him to then sack him at any stage. Well, but pretty much before the start of next season. And Jose would, be reveling in the fact that he actually won Spurs something. If Daniel Levy knew that divorce was inevitable, as it quite clearly was. Why wait? Why give Jose? What? Because that trophy would have probably given Jose a bit more protection. That's the only thing that I might now. Well, personally,
I agree.
I find it difficult to think that they'll.
But that's a very bitter split, though, Mox. When Levy was been in awe of Mourinho for 10 years, which is why he got rid of his best manager that he's ever appointed and brought Mourinho in instead of him. It does seem a bit, I'm not even going to give. That's that's fighting through the record albums and his and hers, the crockery. That's that level of meanness about a divorce. And there were few signs that it was getting that intense that he'd rob him of that chance. Because there's no question if Levy felt he was going to go, a Carabao Cup wasn't going to make a difference. And it's not as if the fans were going to be saying, oh, no, but Jose won us the Carabao Cup. He's got to stay because the fans aren't behind him. Levy would still have been able to make that decision. And to rob him his chance of even that title just seems just a little bit mean.
Quite possibly. I'm just trying to find a reason as to why he would do it now. I don't believe it's the money. If it's £2 million, it's £2 million. They borrowed £175 million off the government, to get them through a variety. I can't really. I'm having difficulty reconciling myself to that. Sorry, Jez, what was the question?
I was just going to ask you, do you think Mourinho now he's not won a trophy since 2017 at any club. Does he look like a manager who's been left behind in terms of tactics, how you approach the game? And obviously Guardiola is running the show at the minute. There's other managers younger than him that are starting to emerge. Do you think he looks like a tired manager now?
I think he probably will need to refine his management methods if he so wishes to. Didn't he say something a few weeks ago saying somebody said you like you've just said you've not won much over the last 5 years or whatever. And he said, well, I'm the same. The players have changed. I think he's probably got to tap in a little bit more to the modern mentality. I think the players that Jose was managing 20 years ago at Porto are different from the ones he's managing at Spurs in terms of their mentality as much as anything. I think Matt just touched on in that documentary about, he talked to Davinson Sanchez. I think some of the modern day players don't like, to be told the harsh truth, and don't like to be, given any criticism whatsoever. And perhaps the mentality, I don't think that I just beggars belief to me as to why a team like Spurs that was absolutely, I thought was, primed to win a couple of trophies in 2016-17, falls flat on its face year after year with the players it's got. And I just wonder whether or not, particularly with the defenders at his disposal, Jose has looked at them and thought, I'd like to change 3 or 4. I mean, you don't mean to tell me Serge Aurier is a Jose Mourinho defender. I mean, I can't quite understand what the bringing why they brought in Matt Doherty, because he thrived at wing back and Tottenham played a flat back. I mean, that seemed bizarre to me. But I think it's a mentality thing, and I think Jose reconciled him towards the end to the fact that that the axe would fall, and that's why he was being a bit more vocal in his criticism of the players. So I'm not surprised he's gone, but I am surprised at the timing of it. I'm just trying to work out quite why it is that Daniel Levy has pulled the plug now.
Andy, do you think that's the last we'll see of Mourinho in English football, and will our game miss him, or will it not miss him?
I suspect it might be the last. It's hard to see where else he can rock up in the Premier League. I mean, he could. Listen, there are a lot of clubs out there in the Premier League who would take him. As if only because he brings an awful lot of publicity, an awful lot of attention on your club. Bizarrely, you could look at a club, say, a club like Newcastle or someone like that. But whether or not he'd want to do that, I don't just mean that club specifically, but of that ilk. Clearly, if again of the so-called elite clubs, then he's done what we would call 3 of them now, and it's clearly impossible for him to do any of the others, and they wouldn't take him. I suspect we won't see him again. We'll probably see him in some form or other. We'll see him an awful on our TV screens. Let's put it that way. If he doesn't, the pundits who he's railed against for his entire career, he will become the arch pundit, and he will become the self-proclaimed special pundit. He will be the pundit to end all pundits. Never mind Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher. Jose will be taken out. Let's face it, he will. So in other words, have we seen the last of him? Absolutely not. He'll probably pop up in gambling adverts as well, as he rather did bizarrely. He will just be, he will be part of our footballing culture. Listen, the next time the England job comes up, there will be certain people linking him with the England job, if only Jose Mourinho himself linking himself with the England job or whatever. Because he was close before. I think we're probably going to continue down the route now, thankfully, of having an English coach as England manager. But you never know. And, should that job become available, then Jose Mourinho, listen, the FA were desperate for him at one point. Let's be honest about that. So who knows? But you're more likely to think that it'd be a job abroad. I don't know. The overriding thing for me is I like him a lot, and I was just disappointed that, again, not quite as quickly as we knew the Super League was doomed, but not far off it. We knew that this was doomed, didn't we? And if you were a mega cynic, and obviously this is absolutely 100%. I just want to, make it clear, 100% not the case. But if you were a mega cynic, you would look at it and you would think it's another payoff, And he is the compo king, isn't he? This must be 80 million quid. When owners give him the contracts, they must just think, how much is the owners are putting these things in there. So basically, I'm not saying for 1 minute that he ever thinks, well, guess what compo I'm going to get if I happen to get the sack. But you do know that it's a very, very, very plump cushion he's about to fall on. And we're talking £80 million in payouts, conservatively. Plus, you do have such is still his charisma and such is still his standing that he's not going to not get another job. So and the last time around, he actually walked into an incredible job in Spurs, having essentially failed at his previous job. So I was just disappointed that he didn't seem to give it more of a go in terms of, I don't mean an effort in terms of effort, but it just never, from sort of day one, from early press conferences when, again, this sort of rather tiresome portrayal of Spurs as somehow being, the minnows in title races. He used the analogy before at Chelsea, didn't he? The small horses, the ponies, that sort of stuff. And then throwing players under a bus, in public. And that just becoming, as soon as you saw all that, everyone just thought, well, here they go again. Here we go again. Most people thought, well, it'll be the normal third season syndrome. It's come quicker than that. And I just thought that on this occasion, he might have, sort of shown people what he actually can do. But I just think what was disappointing for me, never mind, whatever the time and whatever the results for that, I can't believe there was actually a Carabao Cup clause in his contract, but it probably was. But
it would have been any silverware, that's all I'm thinking.
Exactly, yes, I know. But I just think whatever the timing was, I think, it might have surprised us it came when it did, but we knew it was coming. As simple as that. I mean, that's the bottom line. Was I surprised on Monday? Yes. Was I surprised that it ended? No. Again, it was just a question of when and how it was going to end.
Matt, who do Tottenham turn to next? I mean, obviously Ryan Mason is only 29. He's in temporary charge to the end of the season. He's got a cup final to prepare for on Sunday against Pep Guardiola. If he was to win that game, would he have a realistic chance of getting the job, or are we being fanciful and is Levy looking at someone from abroad?
If he was to win that game and finish in the top four, then I still think Levy would say, no, you're not quite ready, Ryan. I mean, you've got to look at it honestly. He's managed one game at top flight level.
Yeah.
He's 29. He's got to be telling Harry Kane where he's going wrong. He's got to be, he's got a World Cup winner there. And I think they're all putting together at the moment. But when they've lost 3 on the bounce and he's there saying, you're doing this. I mean, it's one thing, a lot of successful managers haven't been good players or good enough players. But for him to come from a dressing room where he won't move to Hull because he couldn't get in the first team, and now suddenly he's telling everyone what to do. I just think, regardless of he's an incredible young man, don't get me wrong, but that's a big ask for somebody. Yeah. And you don't land a Tottenham job under normal circumstances. With your first with your first sort of senior position. Certainly not at that age. I think he could go on to become a great manager and possibly a great manager for Spurs. If he does disappear somewhere else and goes perhaps, gets shunted aside by a new regime who doesn't particularly want him hanging around in the background, because that's the hard thing for him. He's taking on this club position. If you're the new manager, it's hard to push him back into the academy, because as soon as you've lost a few games, it's, oh, well, hang on a sec, Ryan Mason's won us the Carabao Cup. He perhaps we give him a go. So he's really taken on a great opportunity, but it could become a big albatross, succeed or fail. It's interesting that Bayern Munich, the sacking of Mourinho came when Bayern Munich is suddenly looking for a new manager. So I think Spurs will be looking for similar sort of candidates that they will, and perhaps want to signal the fact that they're in the market before anyone ties themselves to go up to there. So you're talking about Nagelsmann, and it's that sort of caliber. But you can't go from Jose and said, well, we need someone to win things, and then say, well, actually, Jose couldn't win anything, so we'll go for some guy who's just starting his career. You've got to be going for one of the top trendy names in football. First of all, to persuade people like Harry Kane and Heung-min Son that it's worth sticking around and giving this guy a season while you stick around and see the project through, because that's the sell he's going to have to do over the summer as well. He's got to put someone in charge that Kane and Son are going to believe that could be the man to finally break the hoodoo and get them some sort of real success.
What if Harry Kane goes to Daniel Levy and says, I want Ryan Mason to get the job, and if Ryan Mason stays, I stay?
Well, if he puts that sort of pressure, I don't think that's something
that's what could happen.
Hey,
if I was Ryan Mason, I'd be saying to Harry, listen, I have a word. Harry has a word. Says, listen,
they came up through the graduate, but that gives him a different dynamic, and that would kind of be known amongst the dressing room. And that gives Mason the sort of authority that he needs. So, if he does that, and if Kane believes in him that much, which I think Mason would have to, it's a big what if. But if he did, then effectively you've got Harry Kane in charge, which is up to Levy if he wants to give him that amount of power.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Jeremy. What is nice, I think, is that Ryan Mason leading Spurs out at Wembley. As almost, the Carabao Cup final, which for 36 hours during the Super League fiasco, the Carabao Cup final was being held up as everything that was wrong with the game. It was, Spurs versus Manchester City, everything, two pariahs of the game as they were for that brief period. But now you've actually got a lovely storyline.
Yeah.
A guy leading Spurs out, the game almost, no exaggeration, almost cost him his life.
Yeah.
And now it will be. Can you imagine the emotion? Can you imagine what he's feeling there? Now it's a lovely story. And he's facing Pep Guardiola.
And let's face it, we could do with a lovely story, couldn't we?
Well, that's what I mean. And it would be but we could, to be fair, couldn't we? I mean, let's face it, we could. I was at Villa Park last night. And again, you would have been, 24 hours previous, you would have been going to that game and you would have been sat there in your seat, in your press seat. You'd be thinking, I've just got to, I'm not writing about the game here. I'm just going to be writing about the Super League, about Manchester City, about who cares if they win here at Villa Park or Villa, and I'm looking around and think, well, Aston Villa, that's what you call a big six club, by the way. But then that's another programme probably. And that's normally, but then when this was lifted, I went there last night and you know what? I watched Phil Foden play football. And that gave my football and soul a lift. Let me tell you now, it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Watching Phil Foden drag the ball out the air and ping it across to whatever, and then get in and score. Watching Phil Foden, basically torture Matty Cash. Watching Phil Foden, just run the show, basically. I wasn't thinking about Super League then. I wasn't thinking about what the Glazers are up to. I wasn't thinking about, Sheikh Mansour, or I wasn't thinking about Champions League slices of the pie. I wasn't thinking about John W. Henry, apologising for whatever. I was just watching an absolutely beautiful footballer play football. I mean, just, stunning. And that's what we could do with. And that's what we'll hopefully get on Sunday. And Ryan Mason, I agree with Matt, the chance of him getting the job are, minuscule probably full time. But it's a lovely story. And far more, isn't it a nice thing that he's facing Pep? And not Jose, a sort of careworn, been here, seen it, done it, sort of, the fake scowl, throwing his runners-up medal to a crowd of, well, only a few thousand on Sunday. And isn't it nice that you've got a kid going out there, and it's almost a reward for a career that was cut so sadly short. And I just think and do we need a good? Basically, bottom line is we need a lovely story, and we might get one.
Have you just revealed to the world your column for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Mark, so I want to move on to I want to finish on Man City, but before I do, can I just ask you? Brendan Rodgers is a name that's been strongly sort of linked with Spurs. If you were Rodgers, would you even contemplate taking that job if you were offered it? I mean, because he's got such a good gig at Leicester. They're in the top 4. They'll probably be in the Champions League next season. They've got some great young players coming through. They've just built a new training ground. The future is so bright for Leicester. They're in the FA Cup final. He's doing a fantastic job. If you were Rodgers and Daniel Levy called you and said, "Are you interested?" What would you be saying?
Probably not. Probably not. No, because things change quite quickly in football, and I know Brendan's stock has never been higher. But I think that if you look at the broader picture at Leicester City, what you can see is if they recruit well this summer, they recruit sensibly, and they will be going to market. So we understand that the future is bright for the next 12 months. So Brendan really is settled. He's happy. There's some extremely good footballers at Leicester City. They've just spent over £100 million on the training complex. It's a wonderful place to go and to work by all accounts. I'm just looking at the pictures; it looks fabulous. And Brendan himself says he describes himself as a development coach. And while I personally think he'd be an excellent fit for Spurs in terms of what they've got there at the moment, and I think it's a bit of a jumble in that dressing room. They probably do need some clarity of thought. Now Jose's been in and gone. I think that Brendan's probably positioned just to stay put and see how things go for the next 12 months rather than jump, because he's got plenty of time. He's still a relatively young man, and I can still see some improvements in that Leicester side. I mean, obviously they've got the conundrum of what they do when Jamie Vardy can't raise a gallop anymore. But if you look at the likes of Ndidi, Tielemans, Johnny Evans. Fofana, Kasper Schmeichel, James Justin. I mean, Castagna. These are all top players, and he's got a strong discipline, a strong dressing room there, filled with very good senior professionals, which is, as we all know, is the key to everything. And were I Brendan Rodgers, I'd be saying, do you know what? Not for me just now. But if I was Daniel Levy, I'd certainly have him on my shortlist, and pretty high up it as well.
Matt, Man City, let's move on to Man City before we finish, but it's official, the quadruple is off. They lost to Chelsea in the semi-final of the FA Cup last week. Do you expect City to really sort of bounce back at Wembley on Sunday and make a statement? Because they've still got 3 trophies to play for. Their Guardiola hates losing games. He never admitted City could win the quadruple, but he would have known deep down that they had a great chance to do it this season. Do you expect to see a City side coming out all guns blazing?
I'll tell you what, 21 seconds into last night's game, I wondered if they were going to win anything. It's been remarkable, isn't it, how rubbery they've suddenly become over in certain games. But yeah, they seem to have some sort of weird ownership of the Carabao Cup in recent years, that it's become their trophy, and for whatever it is, they always seem to do it on the day in those sort of finals. And I think they'll be very strong again. It'd be interesting to see as well, because it'll be a lot of players who weren't playing last night, who lost to Chelsea, who perhaps have something to prove from that game, to prove that they are good squad players still. And it doesn't look like Harry Kane's going to be playing for Spurs. So, if I think there'll be too much about City to allow that Spurs to. I mean, they were able to bounce back against Southampton, but I think City will be a step too much. So there's just something about Pep's winning mentality that they won't be off it at Wembley again. They won't allow that, and I think it'll be first one in the cupboard, and see what you can do with the rest.
Boys, just before we finish, because I've got to let you go soon. Obviously, we saw this humiliating climb down from the Big Six in this Super League thing this week, and it's sort of reminiscent of other sort of people having to eat humble pie in football or sport in general. I just wondered if any of you had any sort of anecdotes about previous climb downs, shall we say, in football that have left people with egg on their faces. Deafening silence.
There's definite silence. I actually thought, you know, there's. I mean, talk about football. I mean, there's been probably, many. But in terms of, U-turn has been the, reverse ferret, U-turn, call you what it wants, has been the sort of buzz phrases. And I'm gonna go from personal experience. I'm gonna go for a different sport. I'm gonna go for the Olympics. And Steve Redgrave, if you ever see me in a boat again, shoot me. And then he was back in the boat winning a 5th gold medal, and so to me that will always remain, because I remember that interview very well, and that was the biggest U-turn I've seen in sports, albeit one that we probably all knew was coming.
Well, then you got Fergie's U-turn, haven't you? If we're talking about quitters who didn't, when he made it clear that he was gonna stop.
Yes, and then found out that Sven was linked with a job and was going to get about 3 times as much more money as him.
I remember actually going to.
Actually, I can't remember.
I remember talking to Fergie. I went on a tour to South Africa. It was the summer that United was signing Van Persie from Arsenal, and we were in Durban, and there was a press conference, and about an hour before, news was breaking that they'd signed Van Persie. It was obviously a massive story that summer.
Yeah.
Poaching him from Arsenal. It would have been 2012, I think. Anyway, we were literally walking into the room in this hotel in Durban for Fergie, and Man United had announced the signing on their official website. So anyway, we sat down, and one of the lads' first questions, so you must be delighted to have signed Van Persie, Sir Alex, and he just denied that they'd signed him. He just said, we haven't signed him, don't know what you're talking about. And one of the lads said, well, it's on your website, mate. Karen Shotball, the press officer, was just sort of sat there thinking, "Oh no, this is not good." And Fergie's face just went puce red because we'd embarrassed him, and he went, "Yeah, well, yeah, all right, we have signed him," and just stood up and walked off. That was quite funny.
The quickest U-turn I ever had was I was out in Thailand on a pre-season tour with Leeds, 2002, and was granted an interview with Robbie Fowler by the club after I don't know if he had a late swan song with Leeds, played really well at the end of the 2001-2002 season, went to the World Cup and got just 20 minutes on the pitch despite playing some of the best football he played for years. Certainly, he'd always been had injury problems, but he played really well, but then only got 20 minutes. So I was told, right, you can do it, but you have to do it. He's going up to the lift, to the medical wing, and he's going up to see the physio in the 4th floor of this hotel. You can walk in through the lobby with him, past everyone, up in the lift, and then you'd have to leave it there because you can't get up on that floor. But that's the window you've got to do the interview. Why because he's then in a dash. Brilliant. Talking about all this, how his disappointment of not getting played more and all the rest of it, but it spurred him to hit the floor running in the next season and really make a last gasp bid to cement his place in the England team and perhaps get a few more caps than his career deserved and all the rest of it. And how, the frustrations of sitting there, all I want to do is be playing now. Did all that interview, great stuff, really heartfelt stuff. Came down the lift, and the press officer, David Walker, well known in this parish, asked me, "Oh, how did your interview go?" He said, "Oh, really well, thanks." He said, "I should probably just tell you, the medics just had a look at him, and they decided they're going to give him an op, and he's going to be out for 3 months." And it was the quickest U-turn on a player's future. I thought, "Oh, cheers, David." Yeah, not quite such a useful interview after all.
Leeds was never an easy club to cover back then, was it?
No, not back in the day.
Right, well, brilliant. We'll have to wrap it up there. So thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. I hope to see you next week. Of course, we'll be back with our esteemed host, John Cross, next week, who's having a well-earned break this week. So thanks to Andy, thanks to Matt, and thanks to Mox for joining us this week. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you.